This is the Illinois Nutrient Loss Reduction Podcast, Episode 53, Unlocking the Potential, Exploring Camelina as a Cover Crop. I'm University of Illinois Extension's Todd Gleason. Today, we'll explore Camelina with Joel Groover. He's a professor of soil science and sustainable agriculture at Western Illinois University in Macomb. I called and asked him to tell us a little bit about his work and himself.
My primary activity is undergraduate teaching. That's what I focus on. I teach typically 3 or 4 classes each semester, so around 7 classes a year, and that is what I focus on, making sure that I take the science and translate it into understandable, memorable ideas that the students can take away and apply on their farms or, in their professional activities. And I speak to lots of farmer meetings also, and I really use the same approach that I use in the classroom. Some of the same slides, but mainly the same types of communication, where I've just thought about how to turn, complicated science into a narrative, kind of a story telling type of approach of communication. And the research that I do is kind of broadly speaking related to conservation cropping systems, but more specifically my main research focus is organic cropping systems. And so I'm the director of the organic research program at WIU. We have a 77-acre organic research farm that the university has had since the late 80s, and I've been involved about half of the time. This is my 16th season, and we try to solve the basic production questions of how to grow corn, soybeans, small grains in organic systems, how to meet the nutrient needs. The weed control obviously is an important issue, and I've been trying to figure out how to reduce tillage, add more cover crops to make organic systems work better than just old kind of traditional farming systems.
On that note, can you tell me a little bit about the work with cover crops?
So when I'm talking to farmer groups, I'm thinking about the broader context. How do we establish cover crops, mostly in corn and soybean systems? But in the organic context, our best opportunity is with or following small grains. And so I think a lot about that within my research program, but I'm also regularly communicating with farmers and trying to understand the challenges of the corn soybean system, where we tend to plant late and terminate early, and that limits the benefit. So I'm always thinking about how to expand those options. But the standard corn soybean system has serious constraints, and I appreciate having the opportunity to work in the organic systems where we have less of those constraints. We have less negative interactions with herbicides. We have more just longer rotations, more diverse systems where it's easier to stick in cover crops, and probably the cover crop benefits are not as easily substituted for with inputs in organic systems.
So this winter, you made some presentations related to a cover crop called Camelina. I'm not quite certain what this is, where it's used. I feel like it's from the western part of the United States in its use to begin with. But can you tell me about why you have been exploring it to some extent?
Yes, so Camelina is an ancient oilseed. It goes back thousands and thousands of years to Europe and was one of the first oilseed crops grown. And I can't imagine how difficult it was for those ancient farmers, since it has a very tiny seed. So, harvesting enough to get some real oil out of it must have been challenging. But it has been grown more recently in the western United States. I think the main place where the seed comes out of is the Dakotas. It also is probably grown in Canada, maybe Montana. I guess one key concept people should take away is there is spring and winter camelina. And the winter camelina is extremely winter hardy and will make it through our winters, even planted in late October. In much of the Midwest region, it could be planted in late October and still make it through the winter just fine. The spring camelina, on the other hand, it will bolt, go to flower very quickly. What you want is for it to be in a little rosette stage going into the hard temperatures of the winter. And if it has started to elongate, there's little hope for it to survive. And that's what I have seen. If you plant it too early or you're using a spring type, it just is not likely to stay in that rosette stage. And the basic idea is that it is a brassica that has a longer window of opportunity for planting than radishes, for example, and it's much more winter hardy. So it really, it has the potential to fit in kind of in the same places where cereal rye would fit in, but it has much less potential for negative impact on the following crop than a cover crop like cereal rye.
Why is that the case?
Well, it doesn't make nearly as much biomass as cereal rye. It, I think, is not going to have the nitrogen tie-up, the potential. The concept of allelopathy, where one plant has a negative effect on another, is a complex topic, and I think some of it could be pathogen effects, some of it could be actual biochemicals being released, but rye has the potential to have some negative effects on following grasses like corn, and there's very little evidence that camelina has those effects. Camelina, I think, is really a very safe cover crop to precede corn or many other crops.
How late in the fall do you suppose it can be sown?
I would feel very comfortable planting it after most corn or soybeans would be out in Illinois. And so basically all the way up to November 1, probably, as long as there's moisture so that it establishes quickly when it is planted, it probably could establish that little rosette that can go through the winter. Earlier is closer to October 1 would probably be better, but the window of basically the full month of October, I think, is a good time to plant camelina, and really planting it ahead of October 1. Our experience is that you have much more risk that it will grow too much in the fall and not have the winter hardiness.
Are you seeding it along with other cover crops or by itself? How do you manage the fall sowing is really what I'm trying to ask.
Camelina can be used in a mix with something like cereal rye, and then, for example, you could cut your cereal rye rate quite low. Some people plant as much as a bushel of cereal rye, 56 pounds. But that really creates some likelihood of negative effects on a following crop. So I'm recommending people cut their rye rates back, and a good way to really feel comfortable cutting your rye rate back is to combine it with something like camelina. And so maybe only plant 20 pounds of rye and 4 pounds of camelina might be a good combination. The challenge, and this is really a engineering challenge that farmers and industry people are good at solving, is the seed size is so different. Camelina is hundreds of thousands of seeds per pound, whereas cereal rye might be 15,000 seeds per pound. So there might be, 30, 40 seeds of camelina for every rye seed in terms of just the weight of a rye seed. compared to a Camelina seed. So um, you need to have a way to meter the seed. Just a mix, the straight mix, I don't think will work well. So you have to have maybe a separate metering system for the small seed versus the rye. You don't want to plant the Camelina super deep, but I think um, drilling rye and then scattering Camelina over the surface, like through a small seed box or some type of broadcast system, I think could work. A system locally, a guy had two boxes where he was delivering rye and Camelina through from two different boxes, and then working it shallowly in with a vertical tillage tool, and that established a very nice stand. So I think there are various ways to do it, but the key thing is just to recognize there's such a big difference in seed size that just blending the seeds together is probably not the ideal way to do it.
If you've managed to get the stand, both rye and Camelina, once you get to the spring, what does termination look like?
Both rye and Camelina are easy to terminate with standard burn down programs. One of the ways I see Camelina fitting in is by allowing you to lower your rye seeding rate. You really can probably let the rye grow a little bit longer. The Camelina will start bolting, start going to flower in April, and so farmers have to think about their comfort level with risk. And I think that adding Camelina in, and cutting rye back is a way to manage risk. But on some fields, probably, it depends on the weather. If there's adequate moisture, letting the rye and Camelina grow a little bit longer is probably a good option for some fields. If it's looking dry, like this season, killing it earlier is a better option. The likelihood of just 20 pounds of rye and a few pounds of Camelina having a negative effect on a following corn or bean crop, I think is quite low. And I think what farmers are especially benefiting from these days, and Camelina is a good example of this, there are conservation agronomists working with some co-ops. One of the co-ops in Iowa that I've interacted with is Heartland Co-op, and they have several conservation agronomists that are putting out Camelina test strips and working with farmers, just like retail agronomists work with farmers to make most of our agronomy decisions. Conservation agronomists are helping focus in on the conservation aspects, and Camelina, I think, is a target for a number of the conservation agronomists in Iowa, and I think that's coming to Illinois as well.
Just as a reminder, here on this program, we have talked with the conservation agronomist from Heartland Co-op. You can review episode 35, in fact, if you'd like. But let's continue on now, Joel, for just a moment. What other kinds of things are you considering as it's related to cover crops?
One of the things that I'm looking at specifically within my organic research program is growing cover crop seed, and especially cowpea seed is something that I think has a real potential to be a revenue generator that would fit within if we can grow soybeans, I think with the right cowpea genetics we can grow cowpeas. And I'm always looking for cover crops with smaller seeds, and that may seem a little unusual. That's different, in our grain crops we like grain crops with big seeds, but with cover crops, if we can have more seeds per pound, I think that is generally a benefit. And so most cowpeas are around 4,000 seeds per pound. I have some cowpeas that I am growing this season that are around 10,000 seeds per pound. And I've started planting these cowpeas about a month ago. I planted some yesterday, and I'm looking forward to these cowpeas potentially being something that is a better fit following wheat or oats or other small grains. People are planting mixtures, complex mixtures after small grains, and all the cowpeas that people include are grown down in Texas or in the deep South. And I think we could potentially grow grow those cowpeas here in Illinois, and I'm hoping to maybe be a leader in developing that industry.
And these would be for harvest?
We would harvest the cowpea for the seed. It'd be, cleaned, and then it would be purchased by local farmers as a cover crop. So the local farmers would mostly not be growing it for seed, but a few would, and there would be a local cover crop seed industry rather than the seed having to come, from the deep south.
Yeah, I ask only because I know cowpea is a staple crop, food crop that is, in Africa. What additional advice do you have for a farmer interested in diversifying their cover crop mix?
Well, I think rye is the most reliable cover crop. That's not the the riddle. The riddle is how to best utilize rye, and rye ahead of soybeans, I think, is where the low risk opportunities are. We need to focus in on that. How to, if we're talking about a standard corn soybean system, how to get as much rye benefit ahead of soybeans, recognizing that we have nutrients leaking out of our corn soybean systems in the soybean year as well as the corn year. And many people kind of forget about the soybean year when we're not normally applying nitrogen, but there's still substantial leakage. And I think by growing more rye biomass, maybe just ahead of the soybeans, we can really address those nutrient losses. And then I think because it's a lower risk, much lower risk situation, we can let the rye grow longer. We can also add in some other cover crop species, even legumes. Normally people don't think of legumes being needed if you're preceding soybeans, but I try to think of the whole system, that we're building nutrient supply potential in our soil, and if we do that ahead of the soybeans, because that's when we have low risk and we can let the rye grow longer, the rye with a legume like crimson clover, then that's a good time to do it, even though the benefit from that extra nitrogen availability might really not be till the following year. So look at rye ahead of soybeans, letting it grow longer, but also adding in other species such as Camelina, such as crimson clover. I think those are the real opportunities that I'm looking at right now.
Are there places that people can find the information from you easily?
People certainly can get in touch with me directly, but the Midwest Cover Crop Council website is the clearinghouse for cover crops that I refer people to. Specifically regarding Camelina, we actually have a meeting that's facilitated by the Midwest Cover Crop Council to discuss in Illinois what the NRCS recommendations should be for Camelina. And so we're, a group of us are going to have that conversation. I don't know how that will play out, but definitely Camelina is on the radar, and people want to know better recommendations. I look forward to that conversation.
Joel Gruber is a professor of soil science and sustainable agriculture at Western Illinois University in Macomb. If you'd like to learn more about the Midwest Cover Crops Council, you can do that online at midwestcovercrops.org. That's all one word, midwestcovercrops.org. You, of course, have been listening to episode 53 of the Illinois Nutrient Loss Reduction Podcast, Unlocking the Potential, Exploring Camelina as a Cover Crop. The program was produced in conjunction with University of Illinois Extension's Rachel Curry and Nicole Haverback. I'm Extension's Todd Gleason.